Black Myth Wukong on the RTX 4060, 8GB. So right now we're on 1080p using basically high settings. And as you can see right now, we're already dropping into the upper 50s. No big deal in my opinion, but some people want to lock it to 60. So in display, we're on 1080. On graphics, basically medium draw distance, cinematic textures, medium hair, just to avoid a huge performance hit on certain enemies. On the DLSS option, we're putting it at 85% to be above that 60 FPS target. And as you can see, we can get there just fine using these settings. Again, my aim here is to get over 60 all the time without frame generation. We're going to try frame generation right after this. But as you can see, you can get a very respectable frame rate with a very low hit when it comes to visuals. Of course, ray tracing is completely disabled over here. But textures, just fine. Everything looks perfectly fine. I do not recommend going to the cinematic preset. Very little visual gain. Although if you want to use ray tracing, we're going to try that after this probably. Because there's a few things that look significantly better. But again, visually, when it comes to this game, it still looks great. Again, honestly, I think going above high is kind of a waste of resources, in my opinion. And on 1080p, with just lowering it to 85% with DLSS, you're above 60 all the time. You can even put hair on high if you want to. So yeah. A great looking game, but it requires some resolution sacrifice. If you want to keep it at 60 across the board. Maybe you can even go to 90% to DLSS if you want to. Then when it comes to enemies with lots of hair, well, we got this one. And as you can see, when you get very close to it, and all that hair on the high preset is rendering, we kind of drop into the low 60s. This is why I chose this resolution target. I just wanted to basically be above 60 no matter if the enemy has no hair, if it's bald, or if it's not bald. In my opinion, this should be good enough. As you can see, for this enemy, no problem whatsoever. If I didn't use any upscaling, well, we'll be into the 50s instead. So again, just for stability reasons, I think this is worth keeping it like this. But what if you want to use frame generation? Well, the 4060 is a 40 series card, so we have DLSS frame generation. So we turn that on. And I'm not a fan of frame generation just because of the fact that it adds latency. Obviously, you're fabricating a fake frame in between each frame, so yeah, I mean, at a high frame rate, which is basically above 60, it's usually fine. But I can personally, while it looks way smoother, I can actually feel the extra latency, especially when it comes to dodges, but I've been playing without frame gen so far. So yeah, maybe it's just a me thing. On PS5, the performance mode is basically frame generation to 60 FPS. This is to get over 90. So yeah, there's no problem. So if you want to use frame gen, you have that option. Otherwise, FSR also has frame gen, but now that we have a 40 series card, you might as well, if you like frame gen, use the DLSS option. At least when it comes to upscaling, I think it's fantastic, this game. Or maybe you want to do native with frame generation, that's another option as well. But it doesn't feel as smooth. What about 1440p? Well, 1440p I'm happy to report that it's fine. 57% DLSS because that's basically balanced. At 1440p it looks good. High settings, cinematic textures, let's continue. And this looks way sharper. I mean, if the target resolution is 1440p, that's much higher than 1080p. At least, well, it's 33% more, as far as I remember. And we're in the upper 50s in the worst hair scenario with stuff into the background. But again, this is hair on screen, basically. That's the way to put it. And this is how I would play the game personally on this card. It looks super sharp. I mean, the sharpness difference with the edges is insanely different. I mean, I know it doesn't feel like a huge jump from 1080p when it comes to a number, but it does really look super sharp at this resolution. I'll highly recommend it like this, even if it's with that balanced upscaling. But again, the main issue is hair. You can lower it to medium if it bothers you too much. But that's the thing with lots of strands of hair. It's quite a GPU demand. So what about 1440p with frame generation? Well, you can crank up the super resolution to 66, which would be quality, DLSS, enable frame gen, same settings as before, of course. And now you get something like 80 FPS. But again, this is frame generation, so there's extra latency. Personally, not a fan of frame generation, but you guys always ask about it, so here I am. And well, this one doesn't have any trouble when hair is being rendered. Sorry, fur, not hair. And if I look into the distance, well, got enemies there. Very good. Okay, that's the alternative if you want a higher resolution with some generated frames in between. Which again, my timing is completely broken when using frame generation, in a bad way, of course. But that's also an option if you are using that feature, especially since you have a 40 series GPU probably. That's what you want to do. So yeah, that's great for 1440p, in my opinion at least. Now when it comes to 4K, this is native on a mix of medium and high. As you can see, we're dropping quite a few frames, I would say. So definitely, this card is not aimed at 4K, obviously. But we're at 4K now for fun. We were at 100% resolution. Let's put it on 50%, which is performance. Internally 1080p, but it looks way better than 1080p. Trust me on that one. Medium view distance, medium hair. And I'm not putting global illumination on medium in this case because we're not hitting 60s anyway. I mean, you can hit 60 if you want to, just lower global illumination to medium, but it's going to drop below 60 anyway. But man, 4K being the target resolution, despite being with 50% DLSS, it looks incredible. You see so much more finer detail, it's kinda crazy. So yeah, 4K, highly recommended. You'll be above 30 across the board, as long as you use performance DLSS. You can use 66% DLSS if you want to, but I think 50% still looks good enough on a 4K screen. So no, 4K with frame gen is not working particularly great. I think we're still VRAM limited, lots of screen tearing as well. So frame gen, at least at 4K, I wouldn't recommend it. It doesn't look good, it looks a bit jittery on my screen. Not sure if that comes out in the capture card. But man, it doesn't look good like this. Yeah, frame gen at 4K is too much for the 4060, believe it or not. Imagine getting a 4060 for 4K. So let's increase those textures. Yeah, I mean, the performance improvement was like 15 FPS at best, with a more jittery image. This is significantly better. So yeah, if you're doing 4K, do it for the eye candy of having a higher resolution. Despite using DLSS, again, this is a 4060, not a 4K card. And this is a very demanding UE5 game. But you already knew that when looking at this video, probably. So let's now try ray tracing. So now you want the absolute best with ray tracing and whatever, well, 1080p. Let's put it on native 1080p. Full ray tracing on the highest, and everything on high basically. There's also medium and low with ray tracing. On medium, there doesn't seem to be a lot of rays when you're at this resolution. Very high is quite a bit more demanding, but you get the full visuals. So at least the reflections in the ground, for example, are not super grainy. So again, medium ray tracing looks fine, but above 1080p. If you're playing on 1080p with a card like this and you don't mind the 30 FPS target, I think this is the way to do it. You get great global illumination, you get ray trace reflections, all the good stuff. You can really notice the global illumination if you spend some time in this game, especially when it comes to very occluded areas. You spend a lot of time, at least at the beginning, in places with lots of good trees and indirect lighting. That's good. Then when it comes to water, you got reflections, but they're still a bit grainy despite putting ray tracing on very high. But there you go. So if you put medium ray tracing, at least with these settings, due to the low resolution, you're going to get basically a grainy mess when it comes to reflections. So let's now go fight the guy with lots of fur. Let's see how the how the fur destroys the frame rate. Hi there, good sir. Okay, it's better than I anticipated. But now we got full ray tracing, so hardware lumen, native 1080p. But we're targeting above 30 FPS, which I think, again, considering this is a new game on a card that is not meant for 100% ray tracing, I think this is pretty good. You can also, of course, use frame generation, but with a base frame rate of 30, I wouldn't recommend it that much. But when it comes to ray tracing, again, to make the reflections look good and all that, my advice is to keep native 1080, very high ray tracing, otherwise medium looks super grainy and pixelated when it comes to reflections. And you don't have to sacrifice the settings, because if that's the case, why bother using ray tracing in the first place? If it's going to be a performance hit, a big performance hit, at least make it look good. So yeah, that's what I got for Wukong. You can also lower the settings for better ray tracing performance. You can put ray tracing on medium global illumination, but you'll have way less rays on screen, way lower quality global illumination, so indirect lighting won't look as nice. And the same comes with the water reflections. So if I had to choose personally, why bother lowering the ray tracing if it's not going to look amazing? And you're still not going to hit 100% of the time 60 FPS. So yeah, instead of that, I recommend going for the higher quality option with a lower frame rate. Not because you need to have the highest graphics and everything, it's because if you're enabling ray tracing, you might as well do it right. Which means not looking grainy, not looking like incomplete lighting in some parts. And considering the lower pixel count, again we're playing at 1080p. If you're doing 1440p or 4K, sure, do medium ray tracing on more powerful cards. But again, on 1080p, I think the ray tracing has enough samples to actually look pretty good, despite having a lower end card. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it. First time testing the 4060 on the channel, I gotta say I'm pretty impressed, especially with the ray tracing performance. So thanks for watching, and I'll see ya next time. Bye guys!